Welcome to Bivo's first Quench'd storytelling podcast. I'm your host and Bivo's marketing specialist, Keaton Smith. Last year, we started a weekly story series on our website where we brought in so many amazing cyclists, outdoors lovers, coaches, and adventurers to share stories from their lives. The series is called Quench'd, and every story always ends up making me laugh, cry, or just offers me a new perspective. I'd been wanting to bring these stories off the screen and to life since the beginning and host an in-person storytelling night. Recently, we made it happen at a very special event up in Wakefield, Quebec, the Canadian Shield Bikepacking Summit. The summit was an amazing weekend of camping with group rides, bikepacking workshops, presentations, and storytelling. The Quench'd storytelling night took place night one of the summit around a big bonfire outside, with a late spring chill in the air and a bit of drizzle that faded as the storytellers kicked off. The theme of the night was routes and detours. Everything can be mapped out perfectly, but there will always be moments where you have to take a detour. Storytellers told us about the time that they took a detour on the bike or in life, what they learned, and how they changed. On today's episode, I'm sharing 5 stories from amazing and passionate bikepackers who joined for the summit and bravely told their stories around the campfire. I asked every storyteller what their go-to snack is while adventuring and what piece of gear they can't live without. So first up is a story from Daniel LeBlanc, whose go-to snack is tortillas and peanut butter, and he can't live without his Trekology camp chair, which has more than made up for its weight on the bike. He tells the tale of a detour through a rainstorm, a laundromat, and the lessons learned when the weather wasn't going his way.
Okay, so my story is I was fairly new to bikepacking. I was on my second season, and I was doing the BT 700 by myself. I was on my second day of the route, and I'm coming into the Bruce Peninsula. I'm sort of making my way up to Wyerton, aiming to sleep when my Garmin gives me an alert that there's a severe weather statement coming in. So I pull out my phone and I look, and it's significant rain coming to hammer the whole peninsula. They're predicting 60 millimeters a day. It's just a big, ugly red dot on the radar coming right for me. And it looks like it's kind of just going to clip the peninsula and move on. So I made the decision to cut out that sort of part of the trail, and then all of the single track and gravel that I'm supposed to be hitting, and just kind of book my way down off the peninsula and basically make my way to my next night's campsite, hopefully out of way of the storm. So it becomes sort of a full-on time trial. I'm in the aero bars on the pavement. My 160 kilometer day at that point just became a 230 kilometer day. And I book it basically around to almost Meaford. And I find a place to sleep, hoping I miss the storm. I wake up in the morning and I hear rain on my tent. So I pull out the phone and look, and the storm has changed direction in the night, and the big ugly red dot is bearing down right on me. So I pack all my stuff up as fast as I can, eat some food, look at the trail, cut out a whole bunch more gravel. I'm just going to head east and try and get out of the storm's path. And it just followed me. And when you're riding around Meaford, all that road basically turns into wet clay, and it's slick and awful. And so I was having a hard time riding through that. So I cut out more hills, more gravel, and made my way to Meaford, hopped on the rail trail, and headed to Collingwood, hoping to still escape the storm. It's not working. So I turned south, and I'm just going to follow the highway and try and get out as best I can. And I end up finding this town called Stayner, and I figure it's time to look for a place to sleep, and there is absolutely nothing. I find a guy who tells me the closest hotel is back in Collingwood, 30 kilometers behind me. So I kind of look on Google, see what I can find, and it's a 24-hour laundromat in Stayner and a pizza place that has vegan pizzas. So my option now is to go to the laundromat and to do laundry all night and order pizza. But I got lucky because the pizza guy shows up and tells me that there actually is a bed and breakfast in that town, and it's run out of these nice old couple's house. So I go there, and they were able to put me up And they cooked me like a fresh breakfast in the morning with like a homemade brownies, homemade jam, homemade ketchup, delicious home-cooked breakfast. Put my bike in the garage, so it was super great for them to put me up like that. But it was the next day, again, I'm riding down the highway, and it wasn't until that day at like 5 p.m. the sun finally peeks out between some like clouds. So 2 days, 60 mils rain each day. Sun finally comes out, but it's still kind of raining. So I ended up having to sleep in a gazebo on the side of the trail in Palgrave. And yeah, it was like I woke up in the next morning and it was finally sunny. And I was able to sort of make my way back to the end of the trail, somewhat safer than the last 2 days. And it was pretty good. It was kind of the big takeaway was like no matter how bad things get, just keep moving forward. And like a storm can only last so long. And once you're wet, you're waterproof. So you just keep on going, right?
The next story we have is by Noelle Battle. Noelle has been fueled by countless Sour Patch Kids on so many trips. It is truly miracle energy for her. Her most essential piece of gear is a cargo net that she has on her back rack that she uses for storing her sleeping bag and securing other things like Tivas, clothes that are air drying, and the most essential gas station pizza. Noelle's story proves that allowing yourself to take detours that are calling to you in the moment can lead to great things, including music festivals, groves of hammocks, and new friends.
So I'm joining y'all from the U.S., but my actual longest distance bike trip was a 3-month trip where I rode from my house in Baltimore up to Quebec and all through the Maritimes. And so this is just a little story about like a snippet of some of the magic that I experienced in one of those trips and the beauty of long-term travel like that, where you really kind of can go off course and follow different whims along the way. And so this is one case where I did that. I had great experiences meeting hosts and getting help along the way. A little bit about me, I love live music. It's something that's been important in my life. And actually a lot of people come into bike packing from backpacking, and I never did that. My camping experience was camping at music festivals. Mm-hmm. I wanted to experience music on this trip, but I wasn't really seeking it out or planning my trip around it. But I found myself in PEI. I'm staying at this little hostel, and there's 3 different music festivals that weekend to choose from. So I'm trying to decide, very different which way to go. I ended up choosing this tiny little festival called Shake the Lake. Didn't really know hardly anything about it. There was various bands. There was going to be a Grateful Dead cover band, which I like. So I was okay, I'll go to this spot. Not knowing who's going to be there. I can't remember the specifics, but there was definitely an issue with whether I could get a ticket or not, whether it was sold out. And I tried to contact people the night before, but I was sort of I'm just going to wing it and go on this adventure. I also didn't know, is there going to be food there or drinks? Because it was pretty grassroots thing. But I go to the store. I didn't want to bring a bunch of food if I didn't need it, but I grabbed what I would need to survive. Another little hack for the cargo net is bring an extra dry bag, and I bought a couple of beers, threw some ice in the dry bag, wrap it up, stick it under the net. So I started out on this adventure, and I was starting to get kind of nervous of where am I going? What am I getting myself into? Is everybody going to be 20 years old and I don't fit in here, or are they all going to know each other? It's this small town thing. And so I'm just I have a lot of anxiety about showing up. And I'm also just been doing a lot of riding. I'm kind of thinking oh, this could be really nice to relax. It would be so great if there was just a hammock that would be there, that I could lounge in this hammock. And I'm dreaming of this hammock and riding out there. It's probably 40, 50 miles out there. Pretty anxious. I get there and everything ended up working out magically. I get there, I meet the people immediately who organize the festival. They're welcome. Yes, totally. We're so happy you're here. They're we might order some food tomorrow, but if you need drinks or anything, you can go knock on this trailer door over there. And then it's set up your camp over here. I feel you'll make some good friends up there. And so I go over, set up my tent, actually right next to someone who had been on a long distance hike and had somehow found out about this festival and got picked up and ended up there. But within 5 minutes of setting up my tent, I meet these two women, Wendy and Alana. They were like my age, instant best friends, and just like super welcoming. And so just gotten there. I'm now like sitting in this comfy chair. They've given me some local craft beer. I think they're like passing a joint over to me. And then they're just like, oh yeah, if you want to like relax even more, like we've got this hammock grove over here of like 5 hammocks. And I was just like, it was one of those moments, like I was thinking I got tears in my eyes of just like, I was having so many magical things happen to me on this trip, and it was just like manifesting really cool things. Ended up having this great weekend, made these great friends. I ended up making a connection with someone who was in one of the bands on this trip, and we ended up seeing each other like multiple times later. He came to Halifax to see me like weeks later on this trip. But yeah, so that was just like a reminder of so many things fell into place along this trip that were just kind of magical and manifesting of like when I was in the flow state, which I don't think happens unless you're like traveling for long periods of time, but that, you know, you can just kind of go with the flow and then like really amazing little things happen. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Our next storyteller is JF Nadeau, whose go-to piece of gear is his tailfin top tube bag, which never leaves his bike. His favorite snack is gorp, but without the raisins and peanuts, and with anything colorful or tasty he can add to it. His story made us all laugh. It's a story about his very first bikepacking trip and why, after it was all over, he thought it might be his last.
This story is not about a detour I took, but one I should have taken. And it starts at last year's bikepacking summit, actually. And I was completely new to bikepacking, never did it before. And I totally enjoyed it, so thanks, Chris. It was fantastic. So many speakers and great stories and gear and all that. Super stoked. The week after, I went off and bought some bags and couldn't wait to go for my first one.
You emailed me about that.
So I couldn't wait to go for my first overnighter. And that's essentially, I almost quit bikepacking after that overnighter. So that's the story of the overnighter. So somebody told me about this amazing lake that's about an hour west of here. He had the place to himself. It's like a 2-kilometer long beach. It's a beautiful place. And I'm like, this is going to be perfect. This is where I'm going to go for my first overnighter. And so I pack my stuff, I look up my route and all that, do all the planning, and the weekend is absolutely perfect in terms of weather. Sunshine the entire weekend, and off I go. I'm beautiful first day. It just couldn't go any better. I'm loving this bikepacking thing. It's really great. Get to the lake, and it's indeed fantastic. It looks like a tropical island, literally, and we're here in Quebec. It's so I just can't believe it. There's a nice sort of hilltop and then a cliff, perfect spot. I set up my tent there, beautiful view on the lake, and the guy told me he had the place to himself. So I thought it's going to be quiet. I'm going to have a great night. So I set up my camp and stuff, and then there's a pickup truck that pulls in with a big trailer and parks about 10 meters from my tent. And lady comes out and she starts to pull out all of her gear and set up the whole thing. I'm like, all right, so company. Pulls out a big boombox radio, starts playing the music, the loudest you can imagine. I'm like, oh, great. And I'm like, she's going to do that for an hour. It's going to be okay. And then, so it's a bit of a while. And then I'm just going to go for a walk. And then I see a bunch of people on this inflatable structure on the lake, and a huge one, like really big. And they're completely drunk and they're falling off in the lake. And I'm like, what is this place? And so I walk by, I'm going back to my tent, and I stop for a pee, and I notice this toilet paper all over the place and poop, and like, ooh, this must be like the official shit spot or something. And so anyways, I go back to my tent. Lady's still there with the music. But now she's opened up her big trailer and pulls out an ATV out of there. And I'm like, great, she's going to drive around with this. She doesn't. She pulls an impact wrench and starts wrenching on the thing like she's in the garage. I'm like, what the hell? And I go up to her and say, hey, I don't want to interrupt, but, I if you're gonna do this for a while, I'll move a bit further. And she just tells me to and I'm like, fine, all right. Pack my tent. I moved down the cliff, right next to the lake. There's a tree, and I've got my tent right next to the tree, and then there's maybe a 5 or 6 foot, gap, and then there's a big cliff going up. And set up my camp and my tent, and go to sleep. Now it's maybe 9:30 or something. And I hear some music again, but louder than the lady. And I pull my head out of the tent, and at the other end of the beach, there's a freaking DJ with loudspeakers. Party happening, and that's not what I came here for. And so I go back to my tent. It's past midnight by that time, trying to sleep, and I hear gunshots. I'm like, what the hell is this place? And of course, I'm just freaking out. There's fireworks going on and all that. I'm like, all right, all good. I go to sleep. Then I sleep for about an hour. Now it's like 2:30 in the morning. And I hear an engine louder and louder. And I wake up and I sit in my tent. And I see 2 headlights coming straight at me. I'm like, whoa, what the hell? I open my tent, start yelling. This pickup truck is driving straight at me. And at the very last minute, just goes in the gap between my tent and the cliff and literally drives on the tent poles. I was going to get run over completely. I was like, are you crazy? It's like 2 in the morning or something. Wow. And they've got a big kayak in their truck bed, and they just, a couple of meters away from my tent, they start backing up on the cliff. Every time they back up, the kayak would just slam in the truck bed and make a ton of noise. And they do this like 10 or 15 times. They're stuck, unstuck, and then I'm like, there's other people sleeping and all that. And then they finally settle, and they start unpacking their stuff, like they're getting like coolers and stuff, and they're throwing stuff out. It's making a ton of noise. I yell at them. They don't care. And then all of a sudden I think, karma. They're in the shit spot. That's exactly. I go back to bed and try to sleep. And half an hour later, of course, I get woken up again by some really strong wind. And I open up my tent fly and look at the lake, and I see this pitch black sky with thunder strikes and thunder and lightning all over the place, and this big wind that's pushing all of this towards me. And of course it was going to be beautiful the entire weekend, so I didn't put my tent fly. So I get out of the tent, I'm in my underwear trying to put the thing before the storm hits, and I put the tent fly on top, go back in, and it starts pouring like crazy, and there's lightning all over the place, and then wind picks up, and then 2 ends just give up, and it starts flapping. So I pull my arm out, I hold on to my tent fly just because it was going to go. And after, half an hour, it finally tapers off, and I probably fall asleep like that. And just to be woken up another half hour later by some ATVs at 5:30 in the morning that were racing on the beach. I'm like, that's it, I had enough. Pack my stuff. And I pull out my phone. I'm not the type to seek revenge usually, but I had enough. Pull my phone, I pull out War Ensemble by Slayer. Put it at the absolute maximum. Put it right next to the pickup truck next to my tent, and I put the music on, pack my stuff, and leave. And I had to cut the story in half. There's like 50 other things that happened just to make it, 5 or 6 minutes. But I had enough. I went away. There's so much other stuff that happened. I got to my car and I was like, I hate backpacking. And I thought,
can't wait till next year's summit.
Exactly. So I thought, what could be positive about this? And I thought, you know what? Maybe this is going to make a great story to tell one day. And here we are at the next bikepacking summit. So I did not give up on bikepacking. I actually went for a full week solo trip, and absolutely love bikepacking. So Transgaspésie. Yeah, nice. So I'm back here this year. Wow. Thank you.
Next up, we have a story from Annie Croteau, who loves her 7-mesh bib and her endurance fuel from Upika. Plus, she stops at as many bakeries or ice cream parlors as she can while she's adventuring. Annie tells the story of how she used to love riding as a kid, and her route in life brought her back to cycling in recent years.
When I was making my plan for the storytelling, I'm like, okay, it's a detour. And I wanted to talk about my experience. 1 year where I had to abort my trip because I was sleeping in a BV on the ground, and a raccoon right in the middle of the night pee on me. So I learned after the fact that you need to sleep. I'm short, so I fit on a table, picnic table. But then yesterday, a good uncle passed away. He was really old. Then just that reminded me why I bike, why I love biking. So that's why I wanted to share with you my story, because it's important to, at the end of the day, we are all kids. We all have a big heart, all kids. So when I was a kid living in a small town, and as a kid, cousin lived in the neighbor and uncle and all of that, and the easiest way to get to see uncle and get snack and candies and stuff was use your bike. You know, mom, dad were all working, everybody was busy, so we were biking all the time. All the cousins, myself and my sister, we were biking everywhere. But then times fly, you grow up, and then we get kids. We have professional, we have all a career, and we forget about these things. And then when COVID hit, I started to introduce myself to bike and little bike day trip, just really simple. But then I hit la crise de la quarantaine, hit 40. I'm like, no way. I love it so much. It reminded me when I was a kid. So I decided to, from Gatineau, I went up to David-Louisville, which is between Montreal and Quebec, close to Victoriaville. So that was my first experience, first summer. And with COVID, it was quite complicated. And since then, I'm now 45. And every year, I'm just planning a new bike trip, trying new experience, trying new gear. So I had like a big tent that was too big for me, then a BV. Then I decided only to stay in camping area. But then, now I need comfort. So stay hotel. So every year there's a new ways, new bags in the back, or really light, different bikes. Thank you, Carl. To keep up or trying new things, because my goal is in 2028 to do across Canada. Wow. So that's the big objective. So.
Emily Lafleche tells our final story today. Her most essential piece of gear is her aero bars on her bike, but not necessarily for aerodynamic riding, instead for holding chips between them. Emily's story today takes us through how she took a detour away from her life plan to become a doctor, and how she's quite happy with the route she's on now. For some context, Emily mentions someone named Carl during her story who also told a story the same night and happens to be her partner.
So I guess I'll start this story with, I had a plan, and that's the title of this story, I guess. So I took the detours and routes idea a little bit more broad and decided to talk about the detours that led me into cycling and then into bike packing as well. So I guess like 2015, 2016, I was like 25, and I was like, okay, by the time I'm 30, I'm going to be a doctor, because I was in a PhD program, and that was the path that I was kind of headed on. And around 2017, I was like, this is hard, which it is. And I didn't have any friends, and I was really lonely, and I started biking because my partner at the time biked, and he was like, you should try biking, it's fun. And I was like, oh, okay. So in true Emily fashion, I jumped straight into that. Started riding like a single speed around, and within a month I'd bought a cyclocross bike and was at cyclocross practice. Within a year I was racing gravel and cyclocross, And I think my first year I podiumed at our local event. The next year I went to nationals for cyclocross. I was not good. I just was determined to show up. And like, if they would let me in, I was like, I'm going. So I did. And then whenever the PhD was kind of trucking along, but not so great, I won a scholarship and they were like, you can do a semester abroad. And I was like, okay, it's between two schools, Princeton, which is cold, and Rice University in January. And I was like, Rice University is in Texas. Texas is warm. So I went to Texas and I raced bikes. I did also do schoolwork, but I was on their cycling team. I learned how to ride road races, and I did my first criterium about 2 days after finding out what a criterium was, which was terrifying. And then I won my first criterium a couple weeks later, which was really cool. And I did time trials and gravel races. And then I came back, it was 2019, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna have like the best 2020 racing year. It's gonna be great. I signed up for all these races. And then, as you know, COVID hit. So that didn't work out. And I was like, well, I guess I gotta figure out something else. So I was like, well, I like riding, so I'll just keep riding. And then I just kept riding longer and longer and longer. And in the nature of COVID, I started avoiding more and more people. So at some point it transitioned into riding super early in the morning, waking up at 2:30, 3 o'clock to get out to like Gatineau Park for to ride up the hills so that I'd hit sunrise at the tops of the hills with like the one person who would go out with me. And that was my friend Danny. She got me into the early morning rides. And then at that point I was like, I wonder if I could I'm comfortable riding in the dark. So I wonder if I could ride continuously. And I was like, no. I definitely need to camp. And I was like, well, what is that? And then I stumbled into bike packing a little bit. By this point, I'd already dropped out of the PhD. Just an FYI, that ended up not being for me. It turns out that work-life balance in academia is more like that is your life, so you can't balance life in life. So I ended up in government work, which typical Ottawa. It's better work-life balance, I'll say that. I enjoy it. I have I can leave my work at work and it doesn't come home with me all the time, which is nice. And then I got into bike packing, I guess. My first sort of traipsing into bike packing was cold messaging 10 to 15 people on Instagram who appeared in their profiles to enjoy bike packing as I knew it. So basically I looked for bikes with bags on them and then just cold messaged these people. And a couple of them actually replied, which was cool. And my cold message was, hey, I want to do this 800-kilometer race called the Log Drivers Waltz. What would you think about trying to do an FKT for it? Would that be something that someone like me should even attempt? And Carl was actually one of the people who replied. So he said, you're crazy, don't do it. And I was like, that's a rude person. And we didn't talk for months. And sometime in November, I signed up for it. And I think I was number 11 because they said 10 people have signed up. Who's going to be number 11? And I signed up. And I guess he signed up at the same time. And the organizer said, you're actually number 12. And I was like, he messaged me. He was like, are you number 11? I was like, I am number 11. And we decided we were going to race it against each other for my first bike packing event. You won. No, actually, I got injured at 35K into it. And swollen knee. And I rode until 207 kilometers with that swollen knee before I realized this is really dumb. Why am I pushing this? I can just come back another time and do this. And that's kind of how it's gone. I've attempted the Log Drivers Waltz now. This will be my 4th year attempting it. And each time, like Carl said in his story, you kind of enjoy it a little bit farther each time. And, you may have a plan for things, but that doesn't mean you have to stick to it. Yeah. So, yeah. And Team Skippy. We just skip the parts we don't like. So that's my story.
Thanks for listening to Bivo's first ever podcast episode. I'll be hosting another in-person Quench'd storytelling night soon. this time in Vermont at our favorite hardware store ever. More details coming soon. Thank you to Chris Panaski for hosting the Canadian Shield Bikepacking Summit, where today's stories were told. Thank you to all the storytellers we heard from today, plus Carl Pasolt for telling his wonderful story as well at the first Quench'd Campfire Stories night. Thank you to Joanne Steventon for recording the stories all evening. To read more stories like the ones you heard today, head to Bivo's website at drinkbivo.com and look for our Quench'd story series. Thanks so much.